Welcome back. You're watching World Talks, and I'm your host, Klaudia Czerwińska. European Union foreign ministers are meeting in Brussels to discuss military aid for Ukraine and European defense. According to EU sources, the bloc's foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas is expected to push for a significant increase in military support for Kyiv. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha will also brief the ministers on the country's most urgent needs. It is my pleasure to welcome to the studio my next guest, Piotr Maciej Kaczyński, a regular writer and speaker on EU and international matters. He's a researcher with leading think tanks in Poland and Brussels. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining. It's lovely to have you on the program again.
Thanks for having me. Nice to be back.
It's great to have you. So during the meeting set to take place today, High Representative Kaja Kallas will lobby foreign ministers at the Foreign Affairs Council to support her Ukraine support package. What is the package going to include, and how likely is it that she will be successful?
That's a very good question. Of course, there's no way to tell whether she's successful or what are the terms of her success. But what's on the table, or what she wants to put on the table, apparently there's a voluntary commitment of about 40 billion euros of military aid to Ukraine. This is the new cash, new money that Kaja Kallas would like to get for Ukraine. Of course, this is stepping up of Europeans after what Americans are doing, whether they are or not withdrawing their military assistance, and what is the situation there. We actually do not know, because what Donald Trump is doing is difficult to foresee 2 days ahead. But the Europeans are stepping up nevertheless. So she's asking for 40 billion euros of voluntary commitments from member states, not obligatory commitments. This is a way for her to try to omit all those Hungarian and Slovak potential vetoes, but voluntary commitments from member states. And we'll see whether she's successful or not. What are the terms? This is a meeting today, Monday, and we have a European Council meeting a couple of days down the road to rubber stamp, hopefully positively, that big decision.
Among those foreign ministers and those countries that they're representing, what is the mood like? Because the mood could code for whatever decisions are going to be made in days and weeks to come.
Right, but my reading would be that the mood is rather positive in terms of we need to step up and deliver. This is the world that we live in, or lived in, that we are defending and protecting from the threats out there. And this military threat that Russia poses is very, very significant to everybody. Of course, there are differences of opinion regarding the significance and readiness of committing new funds to support Ukraine between East and West, North and South. But this is exactly why this conversation has to take place. There's a difference of opinion between the Foreign Minister of Spain and Foreign Minister of Poland, for example.
And what do you think are going to be the greatest challenges when it comes to introducing such a budget and convincing others?
Well, unity is definitely a question because certain countries, especially in the South and West, are a little bit more, maybe not hesitant, but they are a little bit behind with planning. Poland has been named so many times to be at the forefront with a significant military budget out there, 4.7% of the budget this year, but not everybody has a budget like this, right? So, Italy or Spain, big countries, are actually a little bit behind. Now the French are very radically promoting their own idea by European rather than non-European supplies, which is yet another topic that definitely will be discussed either today or later during European Council meeting. So, there are different ideas that are being flown around, not only the one of Kaja Kallas and her 40 billion plan, but that is definitely the main point on the agenda.
Europe is definitely trying to step up its game, not only when it comes to its own European defense, but also supporting Ukraine in light of the new U.S. administration. And we know that U.S. President Donald Trump is planning to have a phone call with Vladimir Putin on Tuesday. And so the question is, do you think that we are about to see some sort of a breakthrough when it comes to Russia agreeing to the terms and conditions of this 30-day ceasefire? Are we going to see something change?
Yes and no. So the first point that I'd like to make is that Europeans are out of the shock situation. So the first month of having Donald Trump in office was definitely in shock, and we were paralyzed on what to do next. And right now, with Donald Trump having or not having conversation, having or not having this meeting in Saudi Arabia, for example, a couple of weeks ago, that doesn't matter for European stepping up of supply and support to A, Ukraine, and B, our own security. This is a big topic that von der Leyen has launched, and we have this big conversation, argument in Poland about the voting on resolution in the European Parliament. But pushing this aside, the issues are there for Europeans to consider, A and B. Support of Europeans to the Ukraine going up, and going up security spendings on our own security in Europe. So this is the first part of the answer. Second part of the answer is, of course, it's very important what Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin are going to talk about. Everybody knows that the Russians have an upper hand, especially the Kursk situation. So what are the parameters for Russians to agree to a truce? And the Russians clearly have something to lose in this situation rather than to win. So is there something that Donald Trump can convince Putin with extra of what we've been knowing about so far? That's a big question.
From what we've heard, Russia is not very willing to talk about possible kinds of terms and solutions to the conflict. They have one way in which they see the situation playing out for them when it comes to the ceasefire, and that's Ukraine's surrender. What kind of a deal does that constitute, considering that it's not really a deal?
Because for us, it's a difference of perspective. We see it as a war it's a defensive war of Ukraine against aggressor Russia. For Russians, it's a conflict between Russia and the United States. So if there is a truce, that's kind of a truce between Putin and Trump, between Russia and the United States, because for the Putin's perspective, this is what exactly he wants. He wants the West to stop from coming too close to Moscow. So if there is some kind of a difference of opinion, he wants surrender of Ukraine, meaning push back on the West approaching Russia.
So Trump has warned that unless the ceasefire deal is reached, the conflict between Moscow and Kyiv has the potential to actually turn itself into World War III. Do you think that this is a possible scenario? And what do you think Mr. Trump would be willing to give up in order for that scenario not to take place?
The threat of World War III has been there since February 2022. We are living under the threat that Russians may use the nuclear weapon any given moment, and that's the truth. We've been under this threat ever since. An element of World War III is, of course, Taiwan, and what would happen in a theoretical perspective if Ukraine fails. Europeans, Americans are saying, the progressive Americans, the former administration, have been saying that if Ukraine fails, this is a carte blanche for China to invade Taiwan. Those elements, and then we may have a World War III, because if China massively enters some kind of military conflict, that conflict between China and the United States is a major conflict for everybody in the world.
Around 25 Western governments met on Saturday to discuss the preparations to support Ukraine ceasefire deal once it's reached. We know that military chiefs are about to meet in London on Thursday as well. What do you think is going to be the common strategy? We've heard from Mr. Macron talking about having boots on the ground, talking about the peacekeeping mission. We hear from Russia saying that no NATO military should ever be present on the Ukrainian soil. What do you think is going to be the common strategy?
The common strategy right now is for Europeans at large. So this is EU, and it has to be commented positively, the new activity of the British Prime Minister, but also the new activity of Erdogan in Turkey. So two big powerhouses in Europe that are outside of the EU, UK and Turkey, together with the EU. So those three massive partners coming together, they this is the change of the situation. They are expected, or from at least is my expectation, for them to step up to completely be able to be in a position to replace United States vis-a-vis Russia. So if this is a new powerhouse able to confront Russia in Ukraine without US completely removed from the picture, then Mr. Putin has to talk to Europeans. And those terms are very important for us in the kind of in the situation 2 days from today, not tomorrow, but the day after tomorrow. So, so this is the shifting paradigms and shifting scenarios for now, because look, logically, the peace deal that Trump is promoting has no parameters for success. Maybe this is why he is now trying to push for a truce. Hopefully he's successful. Very likely he will not be successful. So we have to prepare for each of those situations here in Europe.
As part of my final question, I wanted to bring the words of former White House advisor Fiona Hill, who is part of the team of Britain drafting review of defense capability. And she said, I quote, "There's a genuine rupture in the relationship between the US and its allies at this point," end quote. Do you think that this relationship is salvageable at this point?
Yes, I mean, definitely it is salvageable. The question is what kind of reactions we'll have in the United States, in the US government. We hear about differences of opinion between different members of the cabinet of Donald Trump. So there needs to be a reflection, a second thought in the White House about relations that US has in the world. It seems Donald Trump had no problem foreseeing that, yes, there will be a trade situation with our partners, Canada, Mexico, European Union, but at the same time, we are the best of allies when it comes to security. But then you want to invade a fellow NATO member, Greenland, you want to invade a fellow NATO member, Canada, then it definitely has more repercussions. So he never realized that. So this realization now that this relationship, a transatlantic relationship, has been affected, Americans have to recognize this, and whether they will try to mend this and hopefully reach out to Europeans positively, this is something that Europeans are definitely ready for. We've been saying that it is not in our interest to escalate the trade situation. It is in our interest to have America here on the ground, and we do not want America to be removed from the security arrangements in Europe. Whether America wants to remove itself, and
this is a completely different point of conversation, which we are going to have another time because our time here in the studio is coming to an end. Piotr, thank you so much for joining. Piotr Maciej Kaczyński, an EU expert and writer. Pleasure to have you in the studio.
Thanks.
And so this would be all for now here on World Talks, but please do stay tuned because we have Ben Lee coming up with the latest breakdown of some of the latest news.